Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is a regular meeting of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is Tuesday, January 24, 2023. The time is 7 p.m. The first item on our agenda is roll call. Joe Murphy.
Here.
Paul Jordan.
Here.
Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Robin Pothier.
Here.
Elizabeth Karp.
Here.
Peter DiStefano is absent, and Maria Mack is here. Our next agenda item is the consent agenda. This includes approval of minutes December 13, 2022 regular session, approval of minutes December 29, 2022 special session, and the report of the administrative officer. Are there any changes or corrections to the consent agenda? Susan?
I have questions about both items of the minutes.
Okay.
So on the, which one's first? December 13th, on page 6, one of the paragraphs, number 16, is a little wonky, and it sort of repeats itself in number 17. And I don't know if we should change that, but it's maybe needs to be tightened up. The end of paragraph 16 is the same as paragraph 17.
I believe that this was a motion that had been passed, so I would defer to legal counsel whether or not any changes can or should be made to the minutes.
If the motion's already been passed, then I think at this point, it's done.
Thanks. Anything else?
Not on those minutes. On the other minutes, on December 29th minutes, on the second page, it just mentions the South Kingstown train station, and I think we should move it to West Kingston and not South Kingstown. On the paragraph on the second page, the one that starts, Mr. Rabbit explained.
So you're asking for South Kingstown to be changed to West Kingston because that is,
More accurate,
yes.
and that's all.
Okay. Everyone in agreement with that change? Would someone like to make the motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
We have a motion from Paul. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Joe. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Our next agenda item is a pre-application of a major subdivision concept plan, Decker subdivision. And just to remind board members and the public in attendance that a pre-application is an informal, essentially an exchange of ideas and thoughts. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Madam Chair, staff received a late correspondence this afternoon that they were not going to be able to make it this evening. They'd asked to be continued to next month.
Can you give us the date for next month's meeting?
February 28th, I believe.
28th. Would someone like to make a motion to continue this item to our February 28th regular meeting? I'll make that motion. Item 1 to February 28th. We have a motion from Joe. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Liz. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next agenda item, request for reinstatement of preliminary plan approval, major multi-household land development project Driscoll. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Hello, Chair Mack and members of the board. James Callahan, Callahan & Callahan, 3 Brown Street in Wickford. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm here on behalf of Glenn and Gretel McCrory, who are here in the front row. They are the proud owners of 507, 509 High Street in Peacedale, which is only about 1/2 mile north of Town Hall. It is immediately to the north of the Flats Smokehouse Restaurant, which you might be aware of. Currently, there is an existing 3-unit residential structure on site. We are here on a request to reinstate the preliminary plan that was approved by the Planning Board back in July of 2005. Obviously, that was a long time ago. At that time, the board granted the prior owners, the Driscolls, whose name is on the application, or was, to request to add a new 5-unit structure on the property in addition to the 3-unit structure currently on site. Unfortunately, after receiving the preliminary plan approval, the prior owners never applied for final plan approval, which I believe would have meant administrative. In my letter, I indicated the preliminary plan was subject to the tolling due to the financial crisis of 2009. I thought that tolling had applied because the prior owners had applied for variances in 2005, received an extension in 2006, then applied for the variance again in 2008, and received an extension of that variance in 2009. But it turns out, I believe, based on the staff report, that the preliminary plan actually expired in 2006 or 2007. So that was my mistake, but that was, regardless, we're still looking for the reinstatement in some respects. My clients, Glenn and Gretel, purchased the property in 2019. They unfortunately fell into the same path as the Driscolls. They believed that the preliminary plan was in effect, and they too applied for dimensional variances before the zoning board in 2019 and in 2022, which is just about a year ago. This past summer, after receiving the dimensional variance, they went before the building official and realized there was no final plan approval. So, after weighing our options, we are here now before you with a request to reinstate the preliminary plan with modifications. Since the preliminary plan was approved, the South Kingston subdivision regulations have changed. But we believe we meet each of the requirements for reinstatement in that the regulations are substantially the same, and we are seeking a modification of the approval to allow for 2 inclusionary units or affordable units, which would be required by regulation now. Glenn and Gretel are more than willing and happy to add those units as part of the modification as a condition of any reinstatement. And we think that overall, this is the type of development and project that South Kingston is looking for, not only because of the housing situation that we're currently in statewide, but also because it's in a great location. It's near the library, near the Guild, the mill, and local restaurants. And we believe that the plan itself, the way it's constructed, does meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan, which many, many times over requests and in the action items asked that the planning board make amends for new inclusionary units and affordable units in the plan. And we believe that this project, if we don't get the reinstatement in some respect with the modification, will just end up before you again sometime in the future, a year, 2 years, with the exact same presentation. Or, if we don't have that option, there's always the option to seek a comprehensive permit and ask for more density. But at this stage, considering the ups and downs, twists and turns of this whole application, we would like to talk to you about a reinstatement with modifications. And if possible, I'd like to have Glenn and Gretel address you for a minute, just to let you know what they've been trying to do, the process they've entailed, and what they've gone through to get to this stage so far.
Good evening. My name is Glenn McCrory, and we purchased this property in 2019, and at the time we actually met with the town planner, who Kayla at that time actually thought this plan was fully vested. So we made the decision to purchase the property based on the fact that we thought this was a fully vested plan. And we talked and communicated with the lawyer's office that had originally got this plan approved for the purpose that they had known the history behind the property. They reached out to the town and said, to our understanding, this property is fully vested. We want to move forward with the only thing that's remaining, which is the zoning variance. And to our knowledge, that was all we had to do. We applied for the zoning variance. We were approved in June of 2019. And then at that point, we had to get the DM insignificant permit. That was unfortunately stalled out due to COVID, so that took longer than planned. But we did get the insignificant permit, which should be in the application here, approved by DM. And unfortunately, the zoning variance had lapsed during that time, so we went back to get the zoning variance. And again, we were approved for that zoning variance. So then just recently, I believe that was February of this year, and then just recently went to the building official because we thought we had everything in hand to just get our building permits. We spent a significant amount of money on architects, engineers, everyone that, elevation certificates, everything we needed to get done from the, as advised by the building officials, of what we need to do to get a permit. And then a few months into that process, the planning department said, hey, we don't see this original approved plan. So as you can see, we were completely floored by that. We had already gone through the process because in 2019 and all the way through the process, all the communications with this town, we were under the understanding this was a vested plan. So in the best interest of, I think, of everybody and what we've been through, we're hopeful that at least you guys would take a look at the project, see that it looks, in our opinion, I think it's going to be a very attractive, nice building that's going to elevate this area. That is, not exactly a well-known area in South Kingstown. I think it's an up-and-coming area, and we want to help lead the charge into bringing more nice quality housing into the Peacedale area. So.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan is well aware, having been before this board on numerous occasions, that the planning board is very aware and supportive of the need for infill development. I would like to ask at this point for some comments from both staff and legal counsel relative to our obligations with regard to substantial changes in the regulations, both with impacts to or from the Low Mod Act and also any stormwater regulations that may have changed in the intervening years.
Good evening, members of the planning board. This is Jay Parker, principal planner. In the time that has passed since the since the preliminary plan was approved, the zoning ordinance has changed to include the inclusionary zoning requirements that unfortunately passed, I believe, within probably less than a year after the preliminary approval was issued. Also, since that time, the freshwater wetlands regulations have changed, and the DEM stormwater regulations have changed in that time period. So this comes before you now, a request for a reinstatement, and it's the purview of the board if they feel comfortable. Certainly, offering up the affordable units that otherwise would be required today is a step in the right direction, but staff would leave it up to the planning board to make the determination as to how comfortable you feel with making that decision.
Peter, any thoughts?
So I suppose the only thing I would add is that if you were to grant this, in order to get past the finding that the regulations are substantially the same, it's going to require a change to the plan. You could potentially do that if there was a simultaneous application for a reinstatement and a change to the plan. And that way, since both requests would be before you, you could grant one, the reinstatement first, and then grant the change in the plan second. And that way you would ensure that the plan would be revised to comply with current regulation and the current zoning ordinance as with regard to inclusionary zoning.
And do you feel that this could potentially present any problems moving forward with other applications in terms of precedent setting?
Well, I think as far as precedent setting, you can't do it for one and not do it for somebody else that were to come before you. As it stands, if it were just looking at the reinstatement, then you most likely would not, and it's the discretion of the board, but you most likely wouldn't meet the substantially same regulation element that you'd have to make a finding on. Now, I think the difference is that the applicant has stated they're willing to change to meet those regulations. They're not seeking reinstatement in order to skirt those regulations. So really, it's just a matter of what the best process is from the board's perspective.
Thank you. Comments from board members? Paul?
I mean, I guess I'd like to find a way to see this go forward. I'm just not clear about approving something this evening when we don't have plans that fit the current regulations. So,
That's right, it's not just the inclusionary portion of it, but it's the stormwater. This is adjacent to a brook. It's not an ASSF, it's a real brook, and we have to be concerned with stormwater management for, current and future needs. Susan?
Excuse me, do you mind if I step in? This was approved by DM based on the current regulations of DM already. So we kind of skipped a step because we thought we were already approved in planning and zoning. So there's an actual DM approved insignificant alteration permit that's active. We are unfortunately, I don't know how many, I think we might have one more year left in that. So as far as being concerned about those changes, that's already been addressed with the DM approvals.
But that approval, that DEM approval was based on a different plan than what would be required to be up to par with the current regulations.
I think the only thing we need to do is make 2 of our units affordable. Is that correct? We're not changing nothing's changing. We're just making 2 of those units affordable.
From what staff has said, and I don't want to get into a back and forth, I want to hear from other board members, but there are DEM wetlands regulations that have changed and also stormwater management. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board.
So I have concerns. It's 18 years since it was approved. It's different owners. It's different neighboring property owners. When we have projects before us that are allowed by right, usually my deliberations is not so much whether we're going to approve it or disapprove it. It's what are the concerns of the neighbors and how do we mitigate them to the maximum extent practical while still allowing the property owner. In this case, we may have different property owners, neighboring property owners. We don't necessarily know what their concerns are. When we approve a project, we have findings that we have to make. I don't know how we can make those findings when we have 6 out of the 7 board members that weren't around for the first part. I have concerns. I'm all for trying to expedite this as fast as possible, but at this point, I'm not in approval of just reinstating something that was approved 18 years ago.
I don't know if it helps, but we did go to zoning twice.
Could you please
Yeah,
allow the
sorry.
board members to,
Oh, sorry.
Susan?
Welcome. I agree that, for me, this plan, is not complete enough for me to be able to approve it the way it is. I would like to see a landscape plan. I would like to see some ideas about, you've got an area marked off as, I don't know, garden or buffer without any information about what's going there. And I'd also like to understand parking, because I think each unit has a parking space in its garage. But, like, I swung by today, and there were 4 cars parked in that back lot that belonged to the house. But I don't see any location on this plan where you'd have the people in the main house park, as well as any secondary cars that would go with the condominiums. Like, the turning radius for using the garages doesn't seem to lend itself to having any parking on the site for any parking outside of the garage. So I would like to see a plan that shows me on-site circulation and where the tenants for 8 units would be able to park on this lot. I also I guess I need to ask Jay about the regulations, but for the affordable units, I believe they should be similar or identical in size and scale to the other units on the property. But instead of being part of the condominium apartments, there'll be 2 units in the main house, which to me doesn't lend itself to similarity or compatibility in size and scale. So I think that we would need to look at potentially maybe 1 in the house and 1 of the condos, but I think, unless I'm misunderstanding the regulations, having both of them in the main house wouldn't pass our subdivision regulations. Is that, am I misunderstanding?
That is a finding for the board to make. So the board needs to make the finding that the units are integrated within the development, are of like kind substance, that they're not, you can't tell that they're different. They should be integrated. So the determination on integration is a finding that the board makes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think I'm not done. And I also have to also ask Jay, so for a multi-family development, do we need to provide open space or recreational space or common space or some sort of set-aside land that isn't the parking area?
Yes. What's a little difficult about this was one of the variances in particular, I think, was not applicable. There was a variance that was requested, at least initially, or maybe all the way through the process, in regards to having a second dwelling unit on the lot. Our regulations, the multi-household land development projects, they allow for multiple structures on a lot. So this would come in as a multi-household land development project. And yes, there are requirements for open space and buffering that would apply under that section. I can't tell you if the plan that was approved in 2005 complies with that or not. I presume it does. Off the top of my head, I don't know if the multi-household land development regulations were in play in 2005 when this was approved. I think it was, but I can't confirm that right now.
But I think for me, that's another reason that I'd like to see the complete plans before I was able to approve this, because those are things that are concerning to me. And even if they were approved 18 years ago, for my comfort, I'd like to see them in front of me before I approved anything. So thank you.
Can I,
I'd like to hear
Oh, yeah.
from the rest of the board.
I've heard it, yeah, it's been said. I agree with the concerns.
Liz? So clearly, the board is concerned the fact that this has been going on for a long time does not comport with our regulations in certainly more than one area. Anything else from staff? We have a motion before us for consideration, and I feel that the consensus of the board is that this needs to be planned correctly according to all of our regulations. It's one of our requirements for reinstatement that we find that the regulations are substantially the same as they were at the time of the original approval, and that is clearly not the case.
Ms. Mack, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I think we'd like to ask the board to continue this at this time, that we can discuss with staff and Mr. Squires about what we can do to present.
Mitigate,
Right, present the reinstatement motion.
right.
Plus the modifications in writing with plans, with engineered. I think we did supply that, but it'd be better if we showed that to you in full with our witnesses, so you have a full-scale appreciation of the whole project. That way, any questions can be answered. I think that's the best way to go about it, without being denied tonight.
Everyone think that's a good course of action at this point in time? And of course, you understand from our position, we do not want to be setting a precedent whereby another applicant can come forward after however many years and ask to be reinstated when you have
I assume
substantial
this is a
change.
one-off, but that's just a guess. I don't know.
Right.
I think that, you know, it is a good location, and we do have a certain need. We'd love to see it come to fruition and in accordance to how it's been updated.
Sure.
I think it's going to be great.
All right, I think then a conversation with staff will be in order, and we will look forward to seeing you once again at some point in the future.
Thank you very much.
I don't think so. Peter, we don't need a motion if they're going to just speak with staff. We're not making any approval or denial at this point in time.
No, there's no motion is needed at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next agenda item is a public hearing, combined conceptual master plan and preliminary plan, major land development, South County Post and Beam.
Hi, good evening. My name is David Russo. I'm a professional engineer with Dupree Engineering. Before I start, I'd just like to hand out some plans to the board. So we were here last month for this project. We did a full presentation and received feedback from the board and planning staff. We've made a few minor corrections to the plan based on those comments. So I just want to walk through those briefly tonight. I'll start with the landscaping. There's some comments on improvements to the entrance road off of Fairgrounds Road. We looked at that. It was discussed at the last meeting, and one of the comments from the board was looking at the landscape trees that we had in the north end near the dumpster and relocating those along the eastern side of the entrance road. So you can see that change on the plan in front of you on the board. And those trees that are being planted should carry enough up to a point where there's some buffering on the other property, some larger arborvitaes in that area. The other modification that was made, there was a concern with looking at a larger truck go through the site, specifically north of Building 2 in that turning motion. We did run that. It was really close with the layout we had. However, we widened that another 4 feet to give us a little bit of cushion just north of Building 2, and then we kept it narrow where we could. The town engineer also did a review of the plan. One of his comments in the plan that I just handed out, we got those comments on Thursday. They were very minor in nature. The town engineer wanted to see the truck turning motion on the entrance and exit with that same larger truck. So we added that to the plan that was put in front of you. And the other concern was the stretch of road just north of Building 2. The way we were looking at this originally, that whole strip, basically from the drainage pond to Fairgrounds Road, was going to be one way, and there was a concern with traffic taking a left north of Building 2. So you could have basically, a truck turning down that road and then a car potentially taking a left. So with discussions with the planner, we decided to make that from the dumpster on the north end all the way to Fairgrounds Road a one-way. And all we had to do on that is we just added a do not enter sign, so nobody on that parking lot to the right of Building 2 should take a left on the north end of it. So that whole strip will just be one way to the southeast. So vehicles coming in that want to park on the right side of Building 2 would enter, park, and then when they exit, they'd exit to the Fairgrounds Road side. Those were the only changes that were made based on the last meeting and the comments that we received.
Thank you. Comments, Mark from GPS, could you give us some insight into your thoughts with regard to the modifications made to the plan?
Yeah, so we requested to see the turns in and out for each direction onto the main roads because those were larger truck turns than the previous meeting. We wanted to see what the effects were, make sure that those trucks would turn completely onto the pavement and can stay within the pavement areas on the main roads. And the other thing that we were looking at was the interior turn, which David had mentioned, around building number 2. The truck would have to turn, would have to swing a little bit out and take up the whole entire turn lane coming up to the parking lot. So my concern was a car in the parking lot making a left turn at the same time as a truck coming around that turn. So what David has added was a one-way do not enter sign for that section of the driveway access.
And you're satisfied with the modifications that have been presented?
Yes, I am.
Very good, thank you. Questions, comments from board members?
Would you just clarify where the one-way begins? Is it at the corner of Building 2 where the parking lot is?
Just north of Building 2, right there, right where the mouse was. You can see that truck starting to get into that travel lane, which is 28 feet wide, right there. So from there down would be a one-way out to Fairgrounds Road.
And cars coming out of that parking lot to the east of Building 2 could only make a right turn?
That's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments? Susan?
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Sorry, I have a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
So can you make the driveway then a little narrower to allow for a little more pervious surface along that roadway?
We made it as narrow as we could when we originally did that, because we did meet the original design of that, when it was brought up, making that a one-way. We did talk to fire and kind of made that narrow, and then we made like a pull-off lane. The north end of Building 2, just because of the swinging motion of the truck, we had to make that wide, but you can see right as you get around that turn, once the truck's kind of straightened out, we narrowed it back up as quick as we could. We kept it as tight as we could. I mean, there's really no curbing or anything over there, so even if they're a little off, they'll still be able to get through, but that's as tight as we could keep it to get that truck through there.
Thank you. So I also see that along that driveway, you have loam and seed?
Correct, in that rear area where there wasn't landscape, after you get by that landscaping area.
Behind Building 1, you have a New England Conservation Wild Seed Mix that requires a lot less maintenance, potentially less water, and less mowing and whacking and all the things. Have you thought about putting in a wildflower mix along that fence between your driveway and Schneider Electric? A little wildlife love along that fence?
We can, for the final plan, have the landscape architect look at that.
I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm one of
Yeah.
7, but
I wouldn't really be opposed to it. I mean, it'd just be that little stretch between the,
like
The
along
curb.
that driveway instead of having to mow it and water it and all those things.
yeah, it'd basically be from the tree, that last tree on the entrance, all the way up to the dumpster in that area. I wouldn't see an issue with that. I could have the landscape architect up.
I would be interested in that, but again, I'm 1/7 of the gang, so I don't know how other folks feel about that. And then my last question is, I've read that there's a section here that's a pervious surface for overflow parking.
That was in the original design, so where the green conservation mix is, all the way to the west near the pond on that plan in front of you. Originally, the original design, we had that area shown as parking, as overflow parking. And since then, this has gone through a few iterations, and the parking now is all, there's enough parking out there for these 3 buildings in front of the building. So we don't feel that area is needed right now. So we're putting as a whole, basically that conservation mix, if they even clear that area, depending on the phasing of the project. So technically, it could probably stay wooded for a while. But if they do want to clear it, we're proposing the conservation mix. As you said, it doesn't have a lot of maintenance. And then in the future, if they ever did want to put parking back there, depending on the surface material, it may or may not need a DEM modification. Like if they put down a crushed stone or something, we may not have to go back.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thanks.
I have a question relative to the driveway adjacent to Schneider Electric. It is one-way coming out, yet probably about, I don't have a scale with me, probably about 120 feet in from the roadway, the planted area narrows, and it seems as though there's sort of a little kind of a bump out of the asphalt. Can you explain what that is?
It was just a pullover area for just the narrowness of the road in case there is a little conflict where you have 2 bigger vehicles, but since it's one way out, it was originally, I think, on there with the original design and fire. We could probably take that off on the final plans.
Yes, my recommendation would be to eliminate that and to add some additional plantings along that area. This is currently, it's a very narrowly, barely vegetated strip, which is consists of brush, invasives, some look like there are some Norway maples, maybe one birch tree I saw. So this needs to be done correctly. It needs to be of adequate width as shown on the plans, and needs to have enough plantings to really create that buffer. So it would be my suggestion that not only do you eliminate that bump out, but add sufficient plantings along that area, and probably up until you get to where you show loam and seed, kind of just beyond that pond complex. And it would be my recommendation that you do that, and this would be something, in order to keep it relatively simple, have the administrative officer sign off on that portion of the landscaping.
At the, excuse me, at the final stage, you mean?
Excuse me?
At the final, is that what you're stating?
Yes.
Yes. We wouldn't be opposed to that at all. The landscaping on the, we're not opposed to carrying that up, but the landscaping on the other side, it does start to pick up there. They have a lot of like large arborvitaes that have grown in, but we're not opposed to adding up to that lumen seed past like the detention pond.
I think that would be reasonable, since
Okay.
you folks have asked for 2 or maybe 3 waivers from the landscaping requirements, and I think we understand it is an industrial use. However, in terms of long-term, having some kind of a planting adjacent to the egress makes a lot of sense.
No problem.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I make a suggestion just for
Sure.
clarity? Just so the administrative officer can understand, I would suggest taking that planting line all the way up to the end of the parking lot that's adjacent to it, which is about right there. That would afford the screening to the adjacent property and provide some definition to the extent of how far he needs to go.
Yes.
Because lumen seed could be,
Yes, agreed. That's sort of the corner I was referring to, but it's not truly a corner. Sure.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other thoughts from anyone? Jay, anything else from staff?
no, not at this time.
What is the board's pleasure at this point?
Are we saying that administrative office can just sign off on what we've requested tonight, and that we're going ahead?
Yes, I
approving,
think,
right?
I think that Jamie will understand what we're talking about in terms, I don't want to tell him X amount of trees and whatever species, but Jamie has a very good understanding of what we're after when we're talking about buffers and plantings that are appropriate to a site. So this will be continued, and it will be made more substantial, and it needs to be widened, and the invasives need to be removed, and we can add that as a condition. And if there's nothing else, would someone like to make a motion? Yes, it begins on page 4 in the staff comments.
The South Kingstown Planning Board hereby grants combined conceptual master and preliminary plan approval for 551 Liberty Lane major land development project for the proposed development of 3 new buildings for unspecified industrial uses associated with site improvements, assessed plat 21-3, lot 21, located at 551 Liberty Lane, South County Post and Bean, applicant owner. This approval is based upon the following plan set. Town preliminary subdivision, 551 Liberty Lane, located on 551 Liberty Lane, South Kingstown, Rhode Island, assessors plat 21-3, lot 21, sheets 1 through 13, dated February 1st, 2022, with revisions through October 26, 2022, prepared by Dupree Engineering, 2 Stafford Court, Cranston, Rhode Island, with findings of fact A through H, conditions of approval 1 through 6, with number 6 being that the landscape be modified as discussed tonight and approved by the administrative officer.
And before you continue with that, I neglected to ask if there is anyone here. We have a very full house this evening who wishes to speak to this application, because we should actually close the public hearing prior to completion of the motion. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this item? So prior to Joe's motion, would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
So I can make a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes, you can.
I make a motion.
Motion from Susan, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Paul. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Joe has made a motion with the revision of an addition to item number 6 with regard to landscaping along that exit corridor area. If there's nothing else, would someone like to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Second from Robin. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Wildlife Love Seed Mix.
Our next agenda item is a public informational meeting, conceptual master plan review, major land development project, South County Commons, District 5, apartments, proposed 70-unit multifamily residential apartment building and associated improvements. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Good evening, Madam Chair. Attorney Matthew Landry on behalf of the applicant, Suffolk Realty LLC and Southern Rhode Island Hospitality. Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. I'm joined by Sean Hayden from the applicant, Suffolk Realty, Eric Prevey of Dupree Engineering, who's prepared the site plans. And we'll go through the overall design of the project and the sheets that you have up on the screen. I'm also joined by Hans Strauch, our project architect, who will testify in regards to the overall size and scale of the building, general design, and architectural features. Our project team also includes a couple of other professionals that could not be here with us this evening, but are expected to testify at a future date, understanding that this is likely to go forward to another date. That includes Paul Bannon, our traffic engineer, Ed Pimentel, land use expert, Joe Lombardo, and John Carter, our landscape architect. We have submitted a couple of expert reports in advance of their testimony. They will be available, as I said, to testify in regards to those reports, but there was a fiscal impact study by Mr. Lombardo that was submitted. And Mr. Pimentel's land use report was also submitted in regards to the compatibility with town regulations, comprehensive plans, and things of that nature. Just generally speaking, to give some background information on this site and what is being proposed, I know there are a number of residents and abutters to this project that may have some interest in what is being proposed and what we have here. So this is a good opportunity to inform the public as to what is being proposed and a little bit about the background here and how we got here for this site. So this is a comprehensive permit application for 70 residential units, residential rental units, with 25% of those units being designated as affordable. 18 of those units will be affordable units out of those 70 units. The project will contain 35 one-bedroom units, 35 two-bedroom units, and 9 of each of those configurations will be designated as affordable. Now, affordable housing is a very important topic, so much so that the recent legislation has changed in regards to comprehensive permits. And just for the benefit of the board and the public to make them aware of what a comprehensive permit is, it is a sort of singular application process for an applicant to come to a single board instead of having to go through multiple steps in the process, so long as 25% of your units are designated as affordable. Now, affordable units comes with a certain connotation, but it's a very important element in our housing community, as you know. Each city and town is required to meet their 10% affordable housing stock, and that's evaluated on an annual basis by Rhode Island Housing and an annual fact book. And each city and town is required to make substantial progress towards that affordable housing goal. As it stands, as of the 2022 Rhode Island Housing Fact Book, I believe South Kingstown is roughly at 5.25% of their housing stock is designated as affordable, almost half as much as the 10% goals that they're required by state law to be in compliance with. Now, the comprehensive plan, as you know, has an affordable housing plan attached to it, and the comprehensive permit application must be consistent with those goals. And through the testimony you'll hear, we'll address each of those goals in turn. I think it's also important to note for the benefit of the public that the affordable units are restricted and governed by the state to 80 to 120% median AMI, median income. They are monitored and qualified through a monitoring agent that will be designated by the applicant. They're state regulated. They need to have a certain level of income on that 80 to 120% scale, and they do need to qualify for mortgages and for housing. The units will be situated throughout the complex and will be similar in design and features to the market rate units. Now, this property is located in the SMD1 Special Management District and can be identified as District 5 on the South County Commons Master Plan. And the history behind this property is a little bit confusing because it goes way back to the late 90s. And I think we could all benefit just a little bit from some of the procedural steps that this property has seen over the years, including with the Fairfield Inn. As I noted, it's part of the original South County Commons Master Plan known as District 5 that was approved back in 1998 under what it was then the new SMD 1 Special Management District. In around 2016, 2017, the Fairfield Inn came along and received its preliminary plan approval. And this site, as well as one of the other properties in this location, were part of that preliminary plan review, if you will. But there was actually a discussion and a meeting by the planning board at the time weighing in as to whether the original 1998 master plan approval was still valid and whether or not the project could proceed and was vested under that original approval. And there was a decision that was rendered by the board at that time, I believe it was 2017, that said the applicant was in fact still vested under that original master plan. And the reason I bring that up is because the original master plan didn't have any parking, didn't have any buildings, didn't have any uses on that plan. It was really conceptual in nature as master plan is, and which is why we're here before you. So when the Fairfield Inn came along, it actually presented straight to preliminary plan. And on that plan, it did contemplate parking and 2 future uses for the other 2 pad sites, if you will, on these 2 properties. So the hotel use was one that was approved, and this site was originally contemplated a restaurant use, roughly 6,500 square feet in size, and associated parking. It goes around 120 parking spaces. The SMD Special Management District encourages shared parking in a campus-like feel, if you will, for those parking uses, and they're designed to work in concert with one another depending on the proposed uses. So at the time the hotel was built, we knew what the use would be, we knew what the parking demand was, we knew what the parking was required under zoning, and we presented that on our plan. The other 2 uses were expected but not contemplated at the time because market conditions dictate that. And over the years, since 2017, the developer has considered a multitude of uses for this property. That includes the restaurant that was originally considered, office uses, residential, and a variety of other uses that are permitted in the district. And it wasn't until recently that residential market conditions and conditions just generally in the market, the economy, have created an opportunity for residential housing for this site. We've considered the size and scale of the building, the amount of units that are being proposed, We've tried to design this building to be appropriate and considerate of the surrounding features, the residential neighborhood, the commercial uses that this abuts. We've considered how many units will be affordable and the viability of a project to carry an affordable element with ever-changing market rates and housing costs and construction costs and things of that nature. So the testimony that you'll hear, there'll be testimony to the fact of why the building was designed the way it was, why it's not split up, why it's appropriate in size and scale, and how it's taken into account the architectural design and features that make South Kingstown unique, a unique community. The application before you is at the master plan stage, so as you know, that's very conceptual in nature. We're at a very, very early stage of this process, and we're asking for a couple of waivers in regards to building density, building size, height, and parking. And these waivers are needed in order to accommodate the affordable housing element and incorporate those units into our design and make this a feasible project for the site. It's very limited in what we can do on the site. As you'll hear from Eric Prevey of Deprete, is that there's actually already been some site construction here associated with the Fairfield Inn. There is some parking infrastructure, some drainage infrastructure already developed on a portion of this site, so we are severely limited in what we can do and where we can place parking and additional features that accommodate this development. You will hear some testimony in regards to the parking. One of the waivers we're asking for is a waiver. The zoning ordinance requires 2 spaces per dwelling unit. One of the waivers we've asked for is to reduce that to 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. And the applicant's experience, my experience with similar projects, and in the experience and professional opinions of our experts, much less parking is needed for a project like this. The zoning ordinance doesn't take into account the amount of bedrooms per unit. It's just a dwelling unit, space per dwelling unit calculation. So the testimony that you will hear will support this parking calculation. It's included in one of the expert reports that we've already submitted, but I just wanted to bring that up because I know that was something that came up before the TRC. So there were a number of issues that were raised, or concerns and comments over 3 TRC meetings that we had. All the professionals will address those in turn. That was in regards to the height and scale, the parking, buffering and landscaping, and access to and from the property. And we will address those in turn through our various professionals and, of course, answer any questions that the board has. I'll conclude before asking Mr. Prevey to come up that I mentioned there were some changes to the legislation for comprehensive permits, and I bring it up because the findings of fact have changed a little bit, and they weren't indicated in the most recent staff memo that I saw. So I just wanted to raise it, and I think it's important because the legislature has seen a real need and a real housing crisis, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. And one of the things that the legislature did in the 2022 legislative session was change the findings of fact that the board needs to make when denying a comprehensive permit application. And that is that they need to make a finding that the town not only has an affordable housing goal, but has made substantial progress towards that affordable housing goal. And that's a drastic departure from what the standard used to be. They only needed to show that there was an affordable housing plan. We've made an effort to make progress towards that goal. But the legislature has actually changed one of those findings to say that now the town must find that they've made substantial progress towards that goal. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that's important. The legislature thought it was important to make that change. And again, that's why we're here. So on that note, I'm going to ask Eric Prevey from Deprete Engineering to come up and make his presentation in regards to the site design. And then following that, I'll ask Hans Strout to come up and testify in regards to the architectural features of the development.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Eric Prevey, P-R-I-V-E. I'm a registered professional engineer with Deprete Engineering. Offices at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island. Attorney Landry had already kind of gone through the history of the permitting in the past for the master plans, moving to District 5 and such. What I wanted to do before I jump into the specific of the plan was tell a little bit about DePrete Engineering's recent goings-on with it. Over the past 5 years, we worked with the developer to look at a bunch of different uses on the site. And over the 5 years, we took a hard look at the apartments, actually apartments as a use several times, looking how that may be able to develop and such. The idea never went through due to the cost of construction at the time. It never penciled out. Every time we looked at it, it never worked versus the anticipated rents and such when we were working with the developer. So it just never penciled out as a viable alternative. Due to the area increases in rents over the past few years, the developer wanted to relook at apartments in this area and apartment as an idea as well. So we've been working with them since that time. We've been working on it actually since this past spring. We took a fresh look at it, and the developer is committed to actually looking at this apartment and wanting to see this fully out as the idea out here. Recent surge in the construction cost is still of concern for us. Obviously, some of the margins on making it a feasible project are very important to us as well. Anytime you're talking about introducing for affordable housing elements and some of the way that it's subsidized in our costs and such, we need to be able to make sure it still can pencil out. So, but we've worked on it, and the developer is very committed to going forward with this project. Jay, if you could go, can you go to sheet number 2, please, the aerial image real quick? I just want to make sure everyone knows where we're talking about and get us to the site. So I'm going to kind of start way out. The site itself is located at the corner of Tower Hill Road, Route 1, and Hampton Way. Thank you. Yeah. Hampton Way. It is known as District 5 of South County Commons. You can see South County Commons on the aerial up there to the north. Large majority of the portion of it is within that half-a-mile radius that you see. There is also the Wakefield Meadows, located just to the south and west through there as well. And you can see as Old Tower Hill Road comes kind of on the lower left, the southwest portion of that image, just outside the half-mile radius there. That's where Old Tower Hill and comes in there, and you can see the Wakefield Mall and such. I'll just kind of get everybody acclimated with where we're at, first of all. If you could go to the existing conditions, please, Jay. So the parcel itself is there's actually 2 parcels that are as part of it, about 12.8 acres combined between the 2 parcels. That's the hotel parcel and what we call the western parcel, or the rear parcel. The front restaurant pad is not part of this application. As I mentioned, it's about a 12.8 acre parcel. It is mostly what you can see from the existing conditions on there, that there's partial development on the site. So there is a parking lot that has been constructed as part of phase 1 with the hotel. There's about 35 parking spaces located on a loop road on there. Thank you, Jay. And then also an existing stormwater basin. It's a 2-part basin. It has a water quality sand filter on the first stage, and then it kind of goes down to a detention basin that then meters out the water. The remainder of the site is all wooded today, and so because it was cleared to the extent of the parking lot and the stormwater basin at that time. As mentioned, this area is Route 1 Special Management District area. There are utilities located in this area as well. So there is already directly to this pad site, there is already stub for a gravity line for sewer to be able to go to the Bradley pump station. There's already 2 water service lines that were done as part of the hotel. There was 2 stubbed directly to here, one for fire and one for domestic as well. So there's 2 water lines there. And the gas line was also stubbed there. So it's all public utilities in this area. As well. Again, we are at the conceptual master plan stage, so there'll still be a lot of coordination that will need to be done with the utility companies along the way as well. So, going to the proposed plan, thank you. The proposed plan is actually, let me take one other quick step back on kind of a localized here. We were actually before you in August of this past year. We came for a pre-application. I think we were maybe last on the agenda and pretty late at night, and I think everyone was kind of tired at that time. So we went through a pretty abbreviated presentation for you, got some feedback, but I think it's a good chance tonight to be able to get some additional feedback as well. We did go to the October of this past year, October 2022's master plan. We went to a technical review committee meeting. We then also, so we got feedback at that time. We went to the November Conservation Commission meeting as well. So we got a chance to meet with the Conservation Commission, get some of their feedback, and incorporate that into the plan as well. We then went to the November TRC, Technical Review Committee meeting as well in the December. So we've been to 3 Technical Review Committee meetings before even being here tonight, as well as the Conservation Commission meeting as well. Proposed for you is a proposed 70-unit apartment building. It's a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units. We've got 36 one-bedroom units and 34 two-bedroom units. As mentioned, 18 of the units, that ends up being 25.7% technically with the roundup. 18 of the units would be affordable units, and that is a mixture of 9 one-beds and 9 two-beds as well. It is a 4-story building in the front. So as we're when I say the front, to the right, to the east side is the front of the building, looking from Route 1. The right side, it's a 4-story building you would see from that side. Because the topography and the contours naturally go from east to west, it goes from Fairfield Way, which is the road that you can see going north-south. It goes from tapers off to the wetland. There's actually a freshwater wetland that's located on the western portion of the site, and that has a 50-foot perimeter wetland associated with it as well. So that the topography all tapers off from west to east. So the back of that building is a 5-story because it's kind of a natural walkout the way that topography goes as well. So we wanted to contour the land. I think that's important to do, especially for making sure to reduce fill in the area rather than filling up and putting additional walls and additional fill in the back. So you have a 4-story in the front on the eastern side and a 5-story walkout on the western side around the back. The top of the building, and Hans, our architect, is here tonight and is going to speak to it more, but the top of that building is actually looking from Route 1, it's actually lower than what the hotel is today. So from elevational, if you're looking at them, but because of the way the topography goes and the size of the building, it is lower than what is presently there today for the hotel. And that building is also set back 650 feet from Route 1 as well. So it's quite a bit back from the Route 1 area. One of the features that we thought was important for here as well was providing full access around the building. So there's a natural circulation loop that goes around, fully around the whole building, that provides additional parking to all of the sides of the building. That's important for, depending where the unit is, we don't want people walking super long distances to be able to get to their unit specifically. So we thought that was important to be able to pull fully around and provide circulation. That's also a design feature for emergency access as well. Being able to get 4-sided access for any fire protection purposes was pretty important too as well. We did provide a comprehensive parking memo, and that was demonstrating the appropriateness of the parking waiver that we've requested. So what we did is we worked with apartment and hotel managers, and we got back data from them as well on what was appropriate for what they're seeing, because we're always trying to balance what is the right amount of parking, what is the amount that is not going to create additional impervious that we don't need, trying to balance that for stormwater and just general impervious and such. So we did a bunch of research with apartment and hotel managers. We looked at the ITE, which is the Institute for Transportation Engineers, the parking manual as well for both of these uses. And we've also looked at which that is the industry standard for parking as well. And then we also looked at, we wanted to field validate with some actual projects, actual real projects. So we've looked at similar projects as well, and we provided that with a memo. So what we did is, instead of doing the per unit or the per building as Attorney Landry had mentioned, the zoning only allows for 2 parking spaces per unit altogether. That could be a 1-bedroom unit, that could be a 6-bedroom unit. It's the same no matter what. So what we've been finding from the industry standards and is validated also by the ITE parking is it's actually closer to a bedroom count. So that's the way that we balanced it here, is looking at 1 space per bedroom. So with the mixture of the 1-bedrooms and 2-bedroom units, it comes out to about 1.5 parking spaces per unit. So we are providing 106 on-site parking spaces. And those spaces are directly adjacent to the building, either through the part that you can see is already constructed today, and then new parking spaces as well. They're all surrounded directly in this area. None of the parking spaces that are for the apartment would be on the eastern side of Fairfield, so nobody has to go across Fairfield Way. It would all be directly or adjacent to the building. As far as utilities, as I mentioned, they are all public utilities in the area, but we have provided the will-serve letters that are appropriate for this stage, the conceptual master plan stage. We have the will-serve letters for now. We do know that there's obviously much more comprehensive studies. We'll probably need to do a sewer feasibility study. We'll need to make sure that we can make sure the Department of Public Services is happy with the service that the Bradley, because the gravity goes to the Bradley School has a pump station. Those are all parts that we know would end up happening at a future design stage with preliminary plan. But at the conceptual design right now, we do have the will serves that are appropriate for this. As I mentioned too, all of the stubs are put to the site today as well. So it was equipped for it and ready for it. As far as stormwater, we are actually modifying the existing pond. So as I mentioned in the previous, one of the stages of that pond, the part that you can see is still outside of the color portion of the new loop around the building. There is a sand filter, which is one of the water quality pieces on the eastern side there. We're going to be replacing that and moving that, and we've got some underground detention that's shown as well, and we'll be using some stormwater pretreatment units as well with that. So again, details you'll see at future preliminary stages. That's not typically a master plan stage level, but we're always asked to think about where are you putting it, where are you doing it, where is it going to go. So that's what we're proposing to do for stormwater. As I mentioned as well, obviously a lot of details will come at the preliminary plan stage, including all of the stormwater design calculations, all of the stormwater management reports, the soil erosion reports. So all of those would come at future stages as appropriate. As far as open space and pedestrian circulation, Jay, do you have that plan available? Yep, perfect, thank you. We had provided an updated pedestrian circulation and open space plan. As part of that master plan, so the overall master plan that was approved for South County Commons, this District 5, when it was approved for the master plan, was required to have a minimum of 4.07 acres. 4.07 acres of usable area within District 5. We are actually providing 6.94, so quite a bit more. That's 2.87 acres more than the minimum that was required with the master plan approval. That's 70% more than was required as well. They are shown as passive recreation areas. The usable areas are anywhere, by town definition, anywhere that's outside of the wetlands. Wetlands do not qualify as usable area. The buffers of them do, though, because people can use them as upland passive area. And we've highlighted that right on the plan as well. So that includes passive areas that people can use. Also, the plan, we'll go back to it in a little bit, but we've also demarcated 2 locations adjacent to the building itself where there's a possibility for some active recreation directly adjacent to the actual apartment use itself. So 2 locations for it as well. We will be working with the landscape architect to provide additional features on that too into the preliminary plan stages, how we can enhance those recreation areas for the building as well. As far as pedestrian, we had also highlighted on here the red path that goes around. This is similar to the plan that we had shown at the hotel stage as well. We've continued the loops that go around the hotel. There's existing sidewalks that go around today, and we're providing new sidewalks as well with some interconnectivity between them. It comes out to just below, by the time you put the loops around, comes out to just under a half a mile of sidewalks that are actively in this area that people could loop around on as well. So again, additional details will be provided at the preliminary plan stage as we incorporate into the landscape plans as well with the pedestrian circulation. One of the items that was brought up at the TRC meetings as well, and I just wanted to kind of talk about briefly here, and again, I'd be happy to answer any questions later, but actually, Jay, can you go to the wetland plan for me, please? Thank you. Was connection to South County Commons. One of the questions was, could there be a connectivity to South County Commons? And we had provided that feedback and testimony during the hotel stage. That was also questioned and discussed pretty extensively, actually, when the hotel development had come along and looking at how you could potentially get direct access over to South County Commons. And so we did take a look at that. We looked at, first of all, the wetlands. All of those wetlands have all been associated with something that we, Dupree Engineering, have been involved with. So when the Bradley School, that's the one that's just north of us there, shown, that actually had a wetlands permit that was done. So we know that's the actual edge of wetlands. The hotel for the Hampton Inn to the north, that actually had a wetland permit. So those are all actual edges that were done by DEM along the way. Jay, if you can pan just a little bit further north too, so we can see the top of that. The bike path was something that we worked on, so we know that the extent of where the bike path comes through there, and the apartments as well. So we have all of the wetlands in the area. We're not using just, best available GIS mapping. We know that's the actual edge of wetlands in the area, and we know it's an extensive wetlands. One of the reasons that was important is if you just look at town GIS, which again uses best guessing with GIS, it does show an area within the wetland that looks like it's a narrower area, might be able to go across. And so we just wanted to make sure that we thoroughly vetted that out on the wetland end. The narrowest portion of where we could, with the wetland, is approximately 600 feet. But the bigger question and or issue on our end is that there's also a private property between the property of where this apartment is and where South County Commons is. So the Bradley School is not owned by us, and we would need to get permission for Bradley to go through. And we're fairly confident that they wouldn't be amenable to it, giving what their use is with the school and such. We had exhausted it at the hotel stage. And we're fairly confident that that wouldn't be allowed again, even if we could get across the wetlands. One of the other things that was mentioned was whether or not it could be along the shoulder of Route 1. Could it go around the outside into the shoulder of Route 1? And I looked at it again on the drive here today as well. The way that it tapers off of Route 1, the shoulder dips down to a wetland immediately over in that area. There's utility poles along the way. More importantly, we wouldn't want to encourage people to be walking along Route 1. It's a 4-lane divided highway with people that are driving at pretty decent speeds. So that's not something that we would want to be encouraging anyway as well. So we did get a chance to talk to both the hotel and what a potential future manager would be for, and they would not be encouraging anybody to be using the access path regardless. Just from a safety perspective, that wouldn't be something that they would want to do.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
You're not encouraging anyone to walk, but you're putting in 70 apartments that have no other access. If people don't drive, you're absolutely encouraging people to walk on Route 1. I don't understand. I mean, I understand the obstacles, but to say that you're not encouraging people to walk on Route 1 when there's no other way in or out, I find a little bit absurd.
We would expect them to drive. We would. That's typically what people, I would think, even if there was a path, that a majority of people, I would say over 90% of the people, I would think would still get in their car and drive to go to South County Commons.
They don't have a choice.
So
anyway, it's just an observation.
As far as future permitting, actually, Jay, could you go back to the site plan, please? I was just going to quickly show the recreation areas as well. We had shown, there's 2 recreation areas that are shown on the plan. We have one within the southwest portion. It says, we didn't color it, but we left it as, thank you, Jay, yep, possible open space recreation area that we can advance with some additional details into preliminary. And then there's one a little bit to the north there as well. Yep, thank you. That's on top of where there's a approved retaining wall that would be for the grades. So we believe that would be an area that could be utilized as well for something at the top of the wall as well. So as I mentioned, we're at the conceptual master plan stage. As mentioned, the hotel didn't even have a master plan stage, but we are here to get early feedback on conceptual type things. We have many, many phases to go, as you know. We have the preliminary plan stage with the town. We would have DEM freshwater wetlands for state permits to have all the reviews of biologists and engineers on all the stormwater and mitigations of wetland impacts. And then we would have the town engineer would also have a chance to review all of the stormwater calculations. So a lot of phases to go along the way, but I wanted to be able to at least give you an overview of the project.
Thank you. I think we'd probably like to have some questions and comments from board members, and I realize that you have other folks to present, but in the interest of the fact that we have a very large turnout from the public this evening and would like to give them the opportunity to speak, and I think it's also important to clarify for them, because they've heard that this is the master plan stage, and it's basically one of 2 stages of review. However, although Mr. Privy has alluded to the fact that master plan stage is considered conceptual in nature, it's important for folks to understand that there is something called vesting which occurs. Peter, would you like to give a understandable description of what vesting means?
Sure. So vesting essentially means that if you apply by a certain time period, you're reviewed under the regulations that are in place at that time. And if you're approved at a particular point in time and the regulations change afterward, you would be vested to build that development under the regulations under which you were approved. So if he was approved for the master plan, they'd be approved for that development.
So meaning that although there's essentially a misnomer, the second stage of review is called preliminary, which is often very confusing to the public. But as far as the board's review and the public's ability to have any input, the preliminary stage is the final stage, and that is where you get a greater amount of engineering detail. However, the vesting refers to the basics of the plan and the density of the plan, and that is vested if an applicant receives master plan approval. They go on to preliminary, and unless there is a significant error or concern from state agencies reviewing the project, that density and that general plan is vested into the next stage of review. Just wanted to be sure that everyone has a basic idea of what that means. And yes, and we are at master plan right now. Comments from board members. Liz?
Maria, is it possible to hear from the architect and the basis of the design before we make comments?
Yes, because it's 8:20 and we've been listening for a little while, I thought that it might be useful to, if folks had questions relative to engineering at this point, since Eric is at the podium, if they want to ask those questions now. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll have a lot of questions relative to density, parking, open space, comprehensive plan, all those types of things, but I'm going to actually save those until I hear from a few more people, including the audience. But I do want to make a comment while it's fresh on my mind. Paul expressed concern relative to walking on Route 1, and the engineer indicated that we expect that they'll drive. And I find that a little concerning because at the same time as we expect them to drive, which means that we expect every individual that's an adult that is living there is going to have a vehicle because we expect them to drive. Yet at the same time, we're asking for a waiver on the number of parking places to reduce those below what the town minimum is. Now, I will say that one parking place per bedroom generally works. I own about 50 apartments myself, and I'll tell you that it generally works, and it works 90% of the time. But I also tell you that I got 5 multi-unit buildings, and 90% of the time for each building, it works out to be about 2 to 3 nights a week I get phone calls saying there's no parking. So, 90% of the time is probably not what we should size it. So anyways, I do have concern that at the same time, we're putting them in a remote location, and we're designing that based on, we expect them to drive. We're requesting a waiver for the number of parking. So just wanted to give that comment while it's fresh in my mind.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this point in time? Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the access, either the bikeway along Route 1 or through the wetland. You've indicated that Bradley School probably isn't interested, but I feel like we would need to see a solid no from them. I also think DOT should be asked about the possibility of doing something along Route 1. I know that exactly that area you're talking about where it dips right into the wetland. That said, it may be possible to do something along there. I mean, it's just that small area that would have to be filled. It's the edge of the wetland. And then you've got a very wide shoulder up to that stone wall. And I would like to see something from DOT saying, absolutely not, before we say that it's not possible. I'd like to see it investigated.
So furthering what Joe had said about, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, about needing a car to live at this apartment complex. You're also saying to 18 families who would qualify for affordable housing that they also must be forced to own and maintain a car. And so it's, to me, a little discontinuous for me that you're asking folks who cannot afford market rate unit to have to afford and maintain a car, to be able to get to the grocery store, to get to work, to get to school, to wherever they go. And so for me also, that's a problem. You're shortchanging the parking, but you're also saying that the affordable units need to be maintained by people who have cars. And I think that that's maybe not the spirit of the LMI housing. I thought the spirit of LMI housing was that folks had access to public transportation or walking or some other mode of transportation besides owning cars.
Thank you. Anyone else at this point? Robin?
Regardless, I appreciate your research on parking and Joe's comments. I have a very hard time thinking that most people would live alone and just have one car. I think that most people live with someone else, and they probably have 2 cars. I think that if you were to get this approved with that limited parking, that maybe your plan should include additional area left to turn into parking when you realize you have a problem. I know in your report you talk about many people working from home now, but I think that's changing really quickly. People are going back to the office. And so I think that unless you had a plan for more parking, you would have a problem.
Thanks, Robin. Please continue. Do you have your next presenter is your architect?
I'll be here. I'll be here for all of the meetings. So if you have any questions that come along the way, that's not your only chance,
There
obviously.
certainly will
So
be.
please feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our last witness is Hans Strauch, our architect.
And Mr. Landry, just to make a correction, you said that there were 9 affordable units, and it should be actually 18, correct?
There's 18 total, but 9 in the 1 bedrooms, 9 in the 2 bedrooms. So the split is an even 9 to 9 by 18 total. That's correct.
Hi, I'm Hans Strauch. My firm, HDS Architecture, is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I have done work down here in Rhode Island, both multifamily as well as single family, house in Charleston on the ocean, and have built in smaller communities around Massachusetts, Gloucester being one of them. Recently, we did a project of similar scale to this one in Gloucester. And we do a lot of multifamily housing in addition to other types of facilities. But we're very familiar with multifamily residential. Would it be possible to put up I thought there might be a slide that shows some of the process we went through up there. Another one. Okay, so when we first embarked on this project, we were basically given the number of units that we were to build it, design it for, understanding that that was the size of project that made sense for this initiative for affordable housing and combined with market rate. And we were given the site as well, which is situated behind the hotel that exists there. And so one of the aspects that we looked at with respect to siting the building was how it would be sited relative to the hotel. And we understand that the view from Route 1 is an important one for the community. And of course, I understand all of what you look for is the visual compatibility with the historic aspects of your town. So we're not going to put a modern intervention along Route 1. This was going to be a character building, something that over time when we were working with you and looking further, we would develop the design to make it appropriate for this location, this town. What the three images show at the top of the screen here show sort of what you would be looking at as you approach the property. And the far right, I think, shows a little bit best how the hotel would be viewed in front, and then there's sort of a little line in the second arrow to the left. There's a horizontal line there that shows where the top of the new proposed building would sit. It is lower than the hotel simply because it's further away, but it's also dropped down in elevation. The first floor elevation of the building is lower than the hotel, so it's back in the area behind. So moving along, as far as and I will come back to how we planned it with the little diagrams, but as far as elevations are concerned, our first crack at looking at, this is a good one too, it shows also coming into the property, the boulevard there, and the dash lines beyond show where the building would sit. It's not highly visible at all, but it should be, and we want it to be a beautiful building. So first, when we started working on the project, and I guess we can pan out now, we looked at the hotel and not knowing all the facts, but we understood that the hotel went through a process with this board and eventually was approved. And so we said, well, maybe this new building we're designing should maybe mimic some of the aspects of that hotel. This was an early stage concept where basically adopting a mansard type roof with dormers and shed roofs. But I also wanted to introduce decks, porches, pulled out from the building. And that made it a little bit of a complicated adventure. I wanted to do that because it would give it sort of scale and texture. So we moved beyond this particular option into yet another approach. And also looking at some examples around the area to give a little bit of influence on how we were going to move forward with our designs. And there are several photographs of some of these buildings may be familiar to you, showing various shapes, sizes, variety, interest in texture, and the types of buildings that have been developed. These are all residential like one's in a continued care facility. And so now the next image shows pretty much where we are in our master plan stage now. I think there's a nicer, if we go to another slide now, we'll have a bigger image of that might show it off a little bit better. That one, yeah. So this is where we are right now. Basically, again, a 4-story building, but rather than having a mansard roof, we raised the roof above the 4th floor to create a variety of shapes and elements that are more of the traditional character. We have introduced decks, if you will, outdoor decks for every unit. We feel that's an important quality for lifestyle. It also, from an architectural point of view, it breaks the building down in mass, creates more sort of local symmetries. And then when we do this, as you can see right in this view, in the foreground, on the right of the car, you have groupings of elements that sort of break down the massing. So I don't need to give you a lesson on architecture. You've seen a lot over the years, I'm sure, here. But these are the kinds of moves, bay windows, et cetera, that we like. As far as materials are concerned, we have stone introduced all along the first floor base, clapboard siding, and then panels and relief from those panels. So we're interested in shadows and texture on the facade. In addition, at the entryway, we have a pavilion, if you will, that marks the entry into the building and creates a focal point. So if we could go back to my little sketches, shows sort of how we arrived at this. Thanks, Jay. There's another. Oh, that's all right. There's another slide that shows all my little, that's the first one. I guess we'll flip from those further up. There we go. So this shows how the massing worked. The lower left-hand side shows how the units are dispersed. Can you all see this, or it's too small? All right, so there's another group of imageries. Okay, that helps. So, thank you. So this is sort of the first floor. I call it a bubble diagram, first level. I had mentioned a pavilion sort of entry. It's basically in the middle. It's not, it hadn't been introduced yet when I did this sketch, but it's right there. And right at that location, you would enter the buildings where the postal boxes would be. There would be a leasing and management office off of that, as well as an amenity living space where the residents could congregate. This is all typical types of elements that we would bring into a facility of this type. And there's obviously an elevator and such. This would become the main entrance to the facility. And around the edges, you would go down. So maybe we can go to another image here. So that one here, that was mentioned earlier, how either one we can go. This is the upper level, again, showing the dispersed 2-bedrooms and 1-bedroom units. And there's obviously a stair. We like to celebrate the stair at the ground level. Those stairs will have special entry porticos, if you will, that we will show you as we develop the elevations. And then this level shows the lowest level of the building, which will have an entry as well off the parking lot. And the portion of it is buried into the grade, which may be developed into storage space for the tenants. That's still preliminary. But there is the reason you spread the parking around is you want as much convenience for the residents to get into the building as quickly as possible. But there is the envelope, if you will, in the site that we have to work with in order to create this building. So maybe we can just end with the picture of that one right there, yeah, or the larger version, either way. Yeah, perfect. You're better at that than I am. So this is where we are right now, just to give you a sense of our thinking in the design of the building. And as I said, it's as far as its size, I know there was this concern about the size, whether we could break it down. We will continue to work on the building to satisfy your interest in that area. We'll be presenting elevations as you require anyway. We do it ourselves. We do look at it three-dimensionally in the computer. This is a freehand drawing. I still do freehand drawings, but but eventually we'll be doing more detailed computer work to investigate the scale and the character of the building as it moves forward. So that's where we are right now. Happy to field any questions on the architecture.
Thank you. Questions, comments from board members relating to the architecture? Liz?
I have a question. Hans, I know you're dealing with quite a dense building here, and that certainly makes things difficult in terms of delineating. But I would just question, I know that you've shown the hotel as one of the pieces of architecture that you want to be consistent with, and I see a hotel as such a very different animal than housing. I mean, a hotel, you're tired, you pull up, you just want to get to sleep, you don't really notice what's going on, but your home is something so different, and the scale of your home, whether it's multifamily or single, is so much more important. So that's one comment. The other comment that I have is if you look at the other two vernaculars, I guess they're two, actually they're four. The difference is, and it's very obvious, is that the other examples in that area and around Wakefield are, of course, represented as much more of separate houses. Even though they might be attached, you get the sense that it's not one large building, but that you can almost interpret that, hey, there might be 2 units in this building and 2 units in that building, and you just get a feeling of a much smaller scale. And you can see that there on the left. Like I said, I know you're dealing with a large building, a tall building, a long building, many units, but I would hope that there would be a way to somehow bring the scale down to more of a residential scale, because I don't, even though you've added porches, I think that's a nice touch, and the roof lines are certainly a nice touch, I don't see that as a residential scale.
Thanks, Liz.
But I hear exactly what you say.
And I'm inclined to agree with Liz's comments. This is a very large building, and the mass and the scale of it is more like a hotel than a residence. I'm not sure if all of the concerns with regard to thoughts from the TRC were conveyed to you, but one of the suggestions was to consider breaking this up into 2 smaller buildings. Any other questions or comments of the architect?
I got the same comments and truthfully the same concerns. I mean, I'm looking at this, and I think your hands were tied. You were told 70, and that was the start of the project. I don't see this being representative of South County, truthfully. I see this building much bigger. It doesn't necessarily fit, and I can't really even think of another project. I know you got the Pear Village. The density, I just don't see it fitting, truthfully fitting into the community. I think if you were given an open slate and you came in with perhaps designing a little complex with 4 buildings, 6 units each, walkways in between, some grass areas. You would do a great job making it part of South County, but truthfully, I think your hands were tied, and that's just my comment right now, is I don't see this representing South County.
Anything else? I would certainly agree with you on that, Joe. Do you folks have any other presenters at this point?
No, excuse me,
I'd
no,
like
Madam
to give
Chair. We do have 4 additional witnesses that I apologize cannot be here this evening, but they will be here and available at the next hearing, and I'm mindful of the amount of abutters here in the audience, so we welcome their comments. We're here to listen, take their feedback, take that back to our professionals and consider that, so we're happy to answer any questions that they may have as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we proceed with the public, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight and sitting patiently for almost 2 hours, the best thing would be to be as concise as possible. Remember that this public hearing will be continued. Generally, it would be continued to the following month. The board does have a deadline with regard to this master plan. I believe it is March 14th. Is that correct, Jay? And there's been reference made a couple of times to the TRC. This is a technical review committee, which consists largely of staff and 1 duty member of the planning board. And I just, for everyone's benefit, just want to read the concerns that came out of the TRC. I was present. I was the duty member at 1 of the 3 TRC meetings. The request for waivers for parking and the implication for future residents and visitors to the property is one area of concern. The implications on the use of shared parking with a previously approved project that utilized parking now targeted for residential/apartment use. The applicant may need to amend the previously approved development plan to modify their approved parking scenario. Addressing adequate landscaping associated with general landscaping and screening the proposed structure from Route 1 and abutting properties. Addressing the lack of active and/or passive recreational opportunities for residents of the facility. Address the over-reliance on the automobile and develop a traffic transportation plan that can support alternatives to the automobile. The site is located south of the town's 2nd largest retail commercial development, and the development has planned no interconnection. The developer should explore an interconnection between the 2 significant developments. Connections along the Route 1 right-of-way and/or within the Route 1 right-of-way should be explored. The developer should show all alternative plans explored as it relates to modifying the building size and/or building multiple smaller buildings. The applicant should explain the rationale for the bulk and scale of the proposed structure surface versus other alternatives. The applicant should explore all options associated with reducing impervious surfaces associated with travelways, parking, and walkways with innovative technology and design. The applicant shall demonstrate how any proposed open space adds value to the community versus just being land that is left over and not developable. The applicant shall address traffic associated with proposed development and the implications on abutting development. The applicant shall explore additional interconnections, pedestrian and bike, with abutting properties, developments, in addition to internal circulation. All light shall be kept at a minimum and dark sky compliant. Provisions for water and sewer shall be solidified prior to application to the planning board. So folks just have an idea of the concerns that have been brought up, as well as some of the things you've heard this evening from planning board members relative to parking, circulation, connectivity, and the capacity of the site. So if you'd like to come up to the mic, state your name for the record, and we'd like to hear what you have to say.
Good evening. My name is Janet Yazur, and I'm the president of Wakefield Meadows Condo Association. I'm here to review some of the concerns that the community has, and thank you for the community.
And speak into the mic, yes, just lower it a little.
Thank you for the community members being here. As you know, Wakefield Meadows is an over 55 community consisting of 142 units. This past year, in 2019, we had to construct front and back gates because we had a large amount of traffic coming through our community. There were buses from Bradley. There was car carriers from the Mazda dealership coming through. We had
town traffic coming through, people that were trying to avoid the beach traffic for that Wakefield exit or the Narragansett exit would come through. So those are the local people that knew that this was an access. So we put in gates, front and back gates. We have no sidewalks, so walkers walk in the road, which is another concern. So if there's no public transportation, or these unit dwellers do not have cars, guaranteed they're going to walk through our unit. And we don't want to have to be policing and saying, you can't walk through. We do have people from the Fairfield Inn that are temporary people. We know they walk through. They're just taking a walk, not a problem for us. But when we have permanent people living there, we're concerned that it's going to be a greater amount of people walking through. It's a great place to live. We're close to Dunkin' Donuts, Shaw's, Panera's. We can walk to CVS, so anybody that doesn't have a car will clearly walk through our property. And trust me, I've walked down Route 1, just coming around the property, and it's dangerous. It's scary. It's very dangerous. So I hate to see those those rental owners walking that way. We're very concerned about the traffic. Right now, we have cars traveling on Route 1 that use the turnaround for the government center, the DMV, Prout, the Bradley School, Koch Eye, Shepherd's Run, and the Fairfield Inn. Just this past year, we had 2 accidents. One car coming in through Route 1 hit one of the poles and knocked out power to Wakefield Meadows. I've been there 8 years, and we've never had a power outage until this year, so that's a concern of ours. Another car came out of the Fairfield Inn and hit the median, that median that the gentleman just showed on the coming into Hampton Way. He hit that median and destroyed one of our trees and one of the signs. So it's clearly a potential hazardous area. We, in 2008, when Pulte built the development, the landowners and the builders created an easement on Hampton Way. So Wakefield Meadows, we maintain that portion of Hampton Way. So with the construction for these buildings, there's going to be a lot more heavy equipment coming through, so there's going to be more damage on that road. So we do not like the burden of having to maintain that. So please consider that. We're also concerned about insufficient parking. We're concerned about on Hampton Way, we have beyond our gate, there's areas there that people could park. We're concerned that people are going to use that as their excess parking. I mean, these owners will have visitors. There might be people that have students that go to school. I'm not sure if there's going to be bus service for the kids that go to school from there. So we're concerned about that additional traffic. We're also very concerned about all the waivers. If you give these waivers to this dwelling complex, other people will want the waivers as well. Right behind Koch Eye, there's a big area there that could be developed for something. So if these waivers go through, we may have more residential housing and more traffic. The number of dwellings from the existing ordinance here in the town is for 5 dwellings per acre. So now they're asking for 17, which is a 350% increase, which is really incredible. In the same vein, 70 units over the ordinance maximum, and now they want a 30, ordinance maximum of 30, which is a 100% increase in the ordinance that the town allows. So we're very concerned about that other sites will be developed as residential units. The parking spaces, we know that there's a reason why they want to change the ordinance from 2 parking spaces per dwelling to 1.5, because they know there's not enough room. Most people will have 2 cars, even if it's a 1-bedroom unit. I agree with what was previously said. So we know that the town needs affordable housing, and we're asking the planning board to please carefully review the waivers, the traffic patterns, and the burden that this will place on our community and on the town. I mean, the town will have potential for more accidents, more need for police and rescue services, and we're concerned about the water usage within the town. We have drought this past year. We're concerned about the need for more water usage and more restrictions on that. So we will be seeking legal counsel to advise us on this matter, and we appreciate your listening to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know we have other residents that have questions.
So in the interest of efficiency, if whoever wants to speak next is sort of ready, and maybe hold the applause to the end so that we can hear as many of you as possible, because obviously that's the point of the public hearing.
Hi, my name is Antonio Ferrara. I just moved in the condominium 8 months ago. It was so beautiful, quiet. We really enjoyed it, live there. And now this thing is coming up. I'm very disappointed. That building don't belong in the area, because Fish right Hampton Way and the condominium is right across. What about those poor people who live in the condominium over there on South Park? And those people from the window, they look to us over there. We're right there. You think it's nice? That building, they're going to put up someplace else. It'll belong over there. So put up more condominium, it's fine. Not that building don't belong there. That's what I got to say. I've talked to everybody. I hope everybody agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gilbert Fletcher. I'm a resident of Wakefield Meadows. 2 comments. One, I think the Achilles heel of this project is parking. There is not enough parking. I can't accept the logic that the number of spaces should be equal to the number of bedrooms, since most of the bedrooms are going to house 2 people. And there are almost 300 million cars, automobiles in the United States, and 330 million people, so it's almost a 1-to-1. I don't think that 2 parking spaces. Also, I presume these spaces will not be assigned to specific tenants, so there's going to be, a lot of conflict there. People are going to call somebody because they won't have a place to park, or their coveted place where they always park will not be available. The other thing is, I do think this is an attempt to start from the economic side and, squeeze it into what the size and the availability of property is. And I think the measure of that is the number of waivers. If this project really needs 6 waivers, then it's the wrong project for the wrong piece of property. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Russell Maxwell. I'm a Wakefield Meadows resident. 2 concerns. Number 1, there's only 1 egress and ingress. In case of an emergency evacuation, if you have the Fairfield, the apartment complex, and Wakefield Meadows all trying to get out at the same time, it's going to be a disaster. Second concern is when Pulte built the houses on the top of Wakefield Meadows, there was not enough water pressure, so they had to install pumps in those upper units to make sure we had enough water pressure. I think if these guys tap into the water supply, it could lower the pressure even more, and we're back into a low water pressure system, or low water pressure situation. So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Martin Rosenzweig. I'm on the Wakefield Meadows Condominium Board. I have one question. Has there been any impact studies done on the land, environmentally, agriculturally, horticulturally, where our ponds are, drainage ponds? I've been told that there's migrant birds that do settle there. What impact studies have been done, if anything? I mean, has there been soil samples done? We're putting the cart before the horse, as far as I can see. See, you're looking for a master plan. I believe that before you can put a master plan in, you have to have the environment signed off. And this property has been vacant for years. It's near the hotel. It's also near us. We have no idea if there's any pollutants in that land. I think first we have to do an environmental study before any master plan is submitted. I mean, I'm only up here 4 years. I've been involved in major construction projects in New York. And the first thing always is an impact study. I haven't seen any impact studies. I mean, the other planning board, I think that's the first thing that has to be done. Before we even have somebody submit anything, a plan, we have to know if the land is viable. We don't know. This is to me is a problem. And one other thing, that affordable housing. I just heard that on affordable housing, there's an inequity between it's going to be 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Well, with 70 units and we're doing 25%, divide them up equally. I mean, less people are going to take the 1 bedrooms than the 2 bedrooms. The 2 bedrooms are more inviting. I mean, you have children, and we talk about busing, we talk about this, but, you know, you're dealing with inequities here. But again, my biggest concern is, you know, an impact study first. I realize it's going to be expensive. It's going to be thousands of dollars. I mean, and seriously, maybe the owner and the contractor should pay for it. Let's find out if the land is clean. That's the biggest thing at this point. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just one comment. I think that they did propose that the affordable units be representative of the market rate. So there was an equal number of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, and the affordable was 25% of each of those. So that was what.
No, that's not what I just heard. What did you just state?
So I can clarify, so there's 18
Just restate your name for the record so the tape knows who's speaking.
Sure. Attorney Matt Landry for the applicant. So there's 18 affordable units total, and those will be split into 9 1-bedroom units, 9 2-bedroom units. So it's an equal split.
Them up
Yes, we are.
That's not what I heard before, but okay.
No, I apologize, but to clarify, they'll be equally distributed in
okay.
each. That's correct.
Okay, that's fine.
They're
But
required to
again,
do
like I'm
so.
saying, is
Yes.
that seriously, you got to test the land before you build.
Thank you. And we would like to hear as many comments as reasonable tonight, and then we will endeavor to get answers for you, because obviously you've heard that the planning board has many questions and concerns as well.
So, good evening. I'm Anna Maria Verzi, and I'm a resident of Hampton Way, which is adjacent to this complex. We've gone over some of the numbers, but I guess on the face of it, I understand, 4 acres where there'd be development. So without a waiver, that would be 21 units. But this proposal calls for 70 units with the waiver. And I was doing the math, and I was coming up with 240% more units than permitted. Then if you look at the change in the parking spaces, the off-street parking requirements, which we've heard, were 2 spaces per apartment. So the developer's seeking that waiver to get 1.5. So that would be 25% fewer parking spaces. So in my mind, this is not adding up, where you have 240% more units than permitted and 25% fewer parking spaces than required. And then, as you've mentioned and other people have mentioned, more than one person will live in a 1-bedroom unit. More than 2 people will live in a 2-bedroom unit. What if they have cars? It's been well documented that more than half of young adults defined as people ages 18 to 24, live with their parents in the United States. This is the highest share since 1940, following the Great Depression. So we have multi-families living in one unit. And I'll skip along. Also, I'd like to consider the building's footprint. It's 290 feet long, which is nearly the length of a football field. Then you add parking around that configuration. So living near this property will be like living next to an outdoor sports complex that is 4 to 5 stories high, and we will be exposed to light pollution. And furthermore, if the parking plans for this project are based on these unrealistically low assumptions, the development will contribute to visual pollution, such as the unauthorized parking along the perimeter, we saw it around the perimeter, but elsewhere, perhaps along Hampton Way. So I respectfully request that the planning board members to consider these factors when evaluating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patricia Rye, and I'm also a resident of Wakefield Meadows. I wanted to speak about the rainwater runoff because we already have a problem with rainwater runoff in Wakefield Meadows. It's overextended, and they're talking about digging underground to do water collection, et cetera, et cetera. So the environmental impact, the rainwater runoff from additional parking and the building itself. Also, there is a lot of wildlife out in that area, and I don't know if what fisheries and wildlife has been consulted and how that would be impacted, and if there would be a relocation or this is a really big project that's right next to our homes, so you can see that we're obviously all very concerned about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Frederick Wilson. I'm a resident. Actually, I'm the second resident behind my cousin by a half an hour. I moved here 15 years ago. And I also used to be the publisher of the Narragansett Times, and I started the Independent. So I've been very familiar with the whole project of South County Commons, all the special uses, and I've covered innumerable planning boards and zoning boards. And this is obviously what I'm telling you, an attempt to try and get something less. They're coming in with the highest use they could possibly get, asking for a tremendous amount of waivers. There's 12.4 acres there. In point of fact, only that little portion there on is buildable. There are 2 detention ponds they have to deal with. It's on a steep grade, and as you saw in the pictures, there's a lot of wetland there, and that's the reason they can't go up to the commons, because that had been discussed before. And I think what they're doing is trying to come up with a compromise somewhere down the road, because obviously it looks like it doesn't fit in the character of the town of South Kingstown remotely. There's nothing like it anywhere in town. So obviously they're hoping to get something less. And that may in fact happen. And I noticed that they went to a comprehensive review, which can possibly bypass the planning board's decisions he do make here, because the state, in the interest of affordable housing, which is pushing every single town, particularly Narragansett, South Kingstown, Barrington, and Bristol, to develop affordable housing. And it is a big problem in the state. Housing is a huge problem, also because of, look at the values of the houses in South Kingstown. And we priced a tremendous amount of people out. We've lost, in the past 10 years, over 1,200 students in our schools. And the end result is, they're pushing this whole project based on affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a bit of a lull here. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? With the understanding that this will be continued to our February meeting, which is February the 28th. However, we're at a point in the evening where it's not 11 o'clock at night, so if anyone else wishes to speak concisely on any of the other issues related to this or has questions that have not yet been asked, please take the opportunity to do so.
Hi, I'm Ann Colby. I'm a resident of Wakefield Meadows. I'm looking at this plan, this layout, and I'm looking at where all the parking spaces are, and I know they have this entrance, and it looks to me like people who are parked in the back, can they get into their units where they're parked all the way around? Also, where this curves over to Hampton Way, is that actually a 25-foot buffer from our property to that spot? It's so close. Does this building have to be this big? I mean, seriously. Everybody has to park here, but they have to go around and go in there. It's like a hotel. It looks like a hotel. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening?
Hi, my name is Paul Moran. I'm also a resident of Wakefield Meadows. I've been there for 8 years. When I moved in, we purchased the house from Pulte. And as anybody who buys a condominium, they should make some sort of investigation when they buy the home, which I did. I thought for my first condominium. One of the things I obviously didn't think about was the right-of-way. I never looked into that. Maybe that was my mistake, or I should have at least found out. But Wakefield Meadows takes care of that thing. I mean, we're responsible for the asphalt on that road. We're responsible for plowing it. We're responsible for the landscaping. I mean, this doesn't make sense to me, you know? However, how many cars can we accommodate coming down that right-of-way before we say that's too much? I mean, we have to pay for all these cars, all the maintenance of that road. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Does somebody here know what the rules and restrictions are for that right-of-way? Like, that the people who own it have to take it responsible for everybody that wants to move in. In fact, I don't know how many more buildings or places that can build down there. I mean, I never envisioned 70 units of cars. We're talking 70 times 2 cars, 140 cars coming in and out of there, plus buses and trucks. Oh, God, you wouldn't believe all the FedEx trucks. FedEx trucks and UPS trucks. My neighbor, which comes into our development, my neighbor gets two deliveries a day. No, I'm a FedEx and UPS. There's no doubt in my mind. Unbelievable. Traffic is unbelievable. Trying to get out of that, through that light is another thing it would be impacted, I'm telling you. It's too many cars coming out of there. We have to accommodate the cars coming down Route 1 that want to go up to the Proud School. In the morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can't even get out there. The cars are backed up trying to get to the light, trying to get to the courthouse and trying to get up to the Proud School. Anyway, somewhere along the line, I wished, perhaps me, I don't know, but we would find out what the rules and restrictions are. There had to be something that says you can't accommodate everybody in the world and pay for this. I mean, maybe if the town took over the street, it would be a different thing. But for us to have to accommodate everybody that wants to live down in there, it doesn't make sense to me.
For clarification, are you saying that you're responsible for the maintenance from the gate to gate?
No, from the street.
Route 1
Yes.
road? So you're responsible for the maintenance?
Yes.
Your homeowners association?
Yes.
For the section of the road that's currently being used by Fairfield?
Everybody, that's right. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, okay, you got a hotel. It wasn't the end of the world. But that's I think of it as a fewer number of cars than what we have going into this place with a possibility of
Peter, is that something that we can maybe get your input, not necessarily at this meeting, at least next meeting, on what rights they have, if they're paying for it, or whether somebody else should be paying for the maintenance, or, again, not necessarily now, but
Right,
if you could do that for maybe next meeting?
I can definitely look into it. I can tell you just as a preliminary matter, it's probably either governed by the deeds,
Yeah.
you know, whoever, the original deed that split off the lot to Fairfield Way would have in that deed their right of access. So it would be in the means of a private agreement between those two original landowners and recorded in the land evidence records. It also might be governed by the Wakefield Condominium Association's major land development approval. I'm sure there's probably some sort of condition about their requirement to keep up that private right-of-way. So those would be the places to look.
Oh, could you just allow legal counsel to
Janet
finish?
Uzera.
Excuse me, could you allow legal counsel to finish answering
I'm
our
sorry,
question?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, those are the places to look. I haven't looked at them yet. I think it would probably be a good idea both for the applicant and
Yes,
I will
of
as well
course.
to pull that up and take a look at it.
Yes.
But there was an easement that was...
Wait.
I'm sorry.
If this gentleman has finished speaking, then restate your name for the record. And obviously, we're looking for answers, and we're also wanting to hear questions and concerns this evening.
So, Peter, if we could get for the next meeting, what those deeds say and what, potentially what options that gives the homeowners to restrict, or if not to restrict, what options they have to possibly share the course, just so we can understand that there's some type of equability in this project, as well as to the homeowners.
Yeah, and the ramifications thereof.
We could definitely look into that. And just one more preliminary note, I'm sure as a condition of approval, whatever it says now, you could impose another condition about equitable maintenance of that right-of-way. You know, you could put that as a condition of approval, since they are using it, and it's going to increase the usage.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Matt Cavallo. I have a question for the planning board. Have you ever, as a precedent, set a variance on a variance? In this case, they're asking for a density variance and then a variance for parking, which derives from the first variance. Is that legal? And has it ever been done?
An applicant can ask for multiple waivers. Also,
But this one only takes place if you grant the first variance.
one
So
is
it's
related-
derivative from that first variance.
one is related to another, but that does not prevent them from asking. And as Mr. Wilson expressed with such knowledge, on a comprehensive permit, an applicant can essentially ask for anything beyond our zoning ordinance with regard to density, parking. They can ask for an extremely high volume of traffic to be allowed. They can ask for whatever they want. The planning board has criteria by which it must make a decision. The applicant also has the ability to appeal a decision if it's unfavorable going forward.
But in this particular case, it only compounds the situation. It's like a derivative, a financial derivative. And we got into a lot of trouble with those in 2009. And all I'm saying here is that this planning board, remember the ethical concept of the end never justifies the means. We heard about affordable housing, which is a very noble concept. I'm sure everybody in this room endorses that. We heard about the beautiful building that's going to be put there. that it meets all the characteristics, but we have to consider the impact of people who live here, and not just on their financial impact, the quality of their life and their safety. People talked about traffic. There's going to be traffic backed up on Route 1 trying to get off in the morning. And you know what's going to create, in slippery conditions, what that's going to create. There might be, as a result of this, death. And I wouldn't be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Mattoni. I'm a resident of Wakefield Meadows. I've lived there going on 12 years. One of the big concerns I have, I was a professor at URI, students rent. And students with 2 bedrooms will have 4 students living there. They also will have study groups that show up to work together and maybe an occasional party. Rentals in Narragansett this summer, a friend of mine owns a home in Narragansett. The home next door has 3 bedrooms. There are 9 cars parked there because it's rented out by the week, and the people living there invite friends to come down and share the beach time. So I just can't imagine the parking things which have been well described. So I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard George. I live at Wakefield Meadows. We are a 55 community, and we all live with a sense of security. We haven't talked about what type of crime that we're going to be introducing into the area with this complex. That's all I have to say. Because we didn't talk about crime at all that could possibly be going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is John Mayseal. I also live at Wakefield Meadows. But I have a concern. I was in this building yesterday, and someone told me that people were going to be buying each unit. And then I'm hearing here that people are going to be renting the units. And so that leaves me a little confused. And if there's, are they competing with Fairfield? I mean, or is Fairfield taking a part and overseeing it? How is that going to happen? Who is the overseer of this once all the apartments are sold? Or are they being sold, or is everyone going to be just renting? Anyone can answer that?
I'd actually like you to finish all your questions, and then we'll see if we can get you some answers.
Okay. Here I have the same concern because I've seen what friends have gone through in the Scarborough area, where people buy the units, they live in them for the summer, bingo, and then the students are down there. There have been times when the Narragansett police can't even handle it. They have to call in the state police. You know, this happens frequently, you know. But if these are rentals, are they competing with Fairfield? I mean, what's the connection? Is there any connection between the two? That's about basically, I'm looking for answers.
Thank you. We appreciate your concerns, and one of the things that this board has been discussing on an ongoing basis is one of the issues with the shortage of housing is student rentals and then Airbnbs in the summer. So it's a concern for the entire town. The town council is working to resolve that because it's becoming worse as time
So there are
goes
no
on.
restrictions on students coming in and living one of these? If the parents buy it, I don't know if they're buying it or renting it. That's.
I will endeavor to get you an answer from Mr. Landry. Thank you.
There is a restriction, however, on the number of unrelated people that can live in a household. So even if it's 2 bedrooms, you could not have 4 students living there. It would be against the town regulations. So.
And I know what everyone is saying about, how realistic and enforcement and so on. Mr. Landry, would you like to quickly answer the questions about buyers versus rental units?
So these are proposed to be rental units. Again, there'll be market rate units, and then the affordable units will be subject to the state law in regards to AMI. So they'll need to be certain units will be income restricted to those households making 80% AMI, the mean area income for South Kingstown. I can ask the applicant, I can't remember exactly what that rate falls into, but it's defined by state law, and each town is different, and they set the market rate for those affordable units. But the approach here is going to be rental units. The affordable units will be monitored by a local monitoring agent that's licensed by the state, and they handle income restrictions and income limits and things like that.
And the other question was, who is going to be overseeing this apartment complex?
So a management company will come in. So we're working in concert. Southern Rhode Island Hospitality, that owns the Fairfield Inn, is a co-applicant on this application. There'll be some lot line changes proposed here to accommodate these things. There's easements that are part of the existing hotel site, but we're working with the developer. It's the same two owners of these lots will remain the owners subsequent to. We're working together on the entire development. Suffolk Realty is taking the lead on the apartment project, but apartment management company will step in to manage the overall day-to-day operations of that. They've got other facilities throughout the state that also fall into the same type of operation.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Certainly.
My name is Bill Allman. I live in Wakefield Meadows. As you heard, the Hampton Way, the road is our own private road. And my question is, if residents of this unit or anybody parks on that road, and we don't want, no parking on the road, will the local police enforce no parking? That's my question. Can anybody answer it? They won't enforce it? See? It's another good reason not to let them have that many places. It's like down on, I won't even go into that, but so that's the answer. They won't enforce parking.
Yeah. May I answer?
Yes, please.
No, the police department can't enforce on a private property. They can't run out and give a ticket. They'd have to be enforced through the condo association, either by towing the vehicle privately or, probably just through towing. You'd probably have to hire a tow company.
So if you do grant the waiver on parking, this absurd number, they will be out parking on the street. That's for sure. So we have no other alternative but to tow the cars ourselves, which is not an easy thing to do. So I'd like you to consider that as part of your thinking. Okay?
Thank you for bringing that up. So it's getting close to 9:30. Just maybe like to see a show of hands of how many folks would like to speak who have not yet spoken. Not seeing a lot of hands up there. So if anyone would like to speak between now and 9:30, please come up to the mic. Otherwise, we will continue this hearing to our February meeting. You guys are pretty quiet, so. Board, I want to just see if board members, based on what we have heard, have any additional comments or questions so that those can be brought forward to the applicant for the next meeting. Joe?
I don't know. I'm thinking it might be worthwhile to get comments from the board to just give the direction to the applicant, because at least from my perspective, I think that this is significantly different, or it's just too much. It's just too much. And I think as of now, anyways, I'm going to have a hard time getting there. I think the biggest issue is density that drives everything else. Whenever we do a comprehensive permit, we look to balance the needs of the community versus the impact of the community. And there's no doubt there's a need for housing, there's a need for rentals, there's a need for ownership, there's a need for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms. I don't doubt that at all. In a lot of the other projects that we've approved, the densities for the affordable housing have been 150% of the underlying zoning, 175%, sometimes even as high as 200%. This case here, we're looking at 17 units per acre versus 5. So it's over 300%. It's significantly beyond anything that I've remembered in the past that we've approved. I guess to help us with that balance, I want to ask staff for maybe a couple things. One is that the Affordable Housing Commission developed a matrix on evaluating projects for affordable, the potential projects, how far it is to walk, recreational space, utilities, those types of things. So I asked Brian if you could pull that matrix out and give it to board members so they see what, in the past, the town or the Affordable Housing Commission valued and thought was appropriate for those types of projects. And then the second thing I'd ask staff to maybe give us is if we could somehow have a summary of some of the previous projects that we approved by the comprehensive permit, what the underlying density was versus the density we approved. In each of those projects, I think we gave a lot of deliberation to that balance. And we try to balance those needs and the impacts. I think some of those we got right, and I think some of those, after the project was done, we said, "Ooh, geez, I wish we would have had another bite at that apple. That was a little more impact than I thought." I think if you could give us the summary of the projects that we approved, what the density was versus what the density we approved, it help us with that, understanding that balance.
Just a couple points. One, how far back?
I don't know, maybe 3 years.
3 years?
I'm thinking that the last 3 or 4 years was when we really started getting a lot of comprehensive. And I think if we look at that and we look at, this one was 150%, that fit pretty good. This was 200%. Geez, that's got a lot of bad feedback after that one.
My comment, which is significant to that, is just as with any application that comes to a planning board or a zoning board, every application, every property is unique. Everyone presents presents their own characteristics. So trying to make that correlation between, well, gee, this and that, and we should have did it, it's very difficult to do. Now I think it is worthwhile, is that it's sort of paints a picture, puts things in perspective a little bit, but I don't know how truly useful that would be. But I certainly we can take a look at that.
It's not finite. I'm just looking for things that could help myself and other board members with making that balance between the needs of the community and the impacts of the community. And I think some of that will jog our memory of, wish I would have done this a little different, or so I'd ask the staff for those two things. And
Thanks, Joe. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree with everyone. I think it's too big for the site. The access, the pedestrian access still bothers me a lot. And I wonder, because there's this issue with Hampton Way, with the Wakefield Meadows Association paying for all the maintenance, if there's some option there for negotiation that takes that maintenance responsibility away from them in exchange for allowing pedestrian cycling access through the facility, not vehicles, just pedestrian. I see people shaking their heads. Just thought I'd throw it out there. Just a thought, folks, just a thought. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV.
Other thoughts? Susan? Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing that I'm concerned about is that we have an approved plan for the hotel that included the hotel, the parking that was required for the hotel, the stormwater management for the hotel, and a hotel restaurant. And we haven't revisited that plan to assess whether or not they actually need the parking that we prescribed for their original development. And so I think that if the developer were to, say, sell that hotel might be surprised to realize that he's no longer going to be able to put a restaurant by the hotel. He might be short on his parking, and there's other things that, if this plan changes the hotel plan, we have to go back and visit the hotel plan and make sure that we can take away parking from that hotel and we can take away the restaurant from the hotel, because right now that hotel still has permission from us to put a restaurant and use all that parking. And we're taking things away from that hotel that I mean, on paper, they can still put a restaurant in after this comes in, because we've given them permission to put that. And I think we're way putting the cart before the horse here to even think about taking away from the hotel without even addressing that original permission that they received from us for the development. So that's my first thought on that. I am concerned about the apartments, the apartments becoming short-term rentals, and that hasn't been addressed, and I don't know if I'm even allowed to ask what a property owner wants to do, but I think that if this were short-term rentals and that was your intention, that does change the conversation, and that hasn't even been asked, whether or not this is year-round rentals for South Kingstown residents who need a place to live, or if this is catering to a tourist and transient industry. And I would like to hear an answer to, and a commitment to the answer that we receive on that. I also would like to understand the buffer from Hampton Way. I think that was a very good point that one of the residents made, that the parking lot here skims the edge of Hampton Way, and I'd like to understand what that buffer should be between those two properties. So I'd like to see that also. The open space map showed a lot of green space around the Bradley property, and it implied that that space was available to residents of this property to use, that there's green space next door at Bradley. But I think that's a little deceptive if that's not space that these residents can actually use. I don't understand what all that green is, but it's implying to me that that is open space that for the residents to use. And I also, I think lastly, I would like to talk about, I was at one of the TRC meetings also, and we came up with 12 requests, and it specifically says the following items need to be addressed. And I don't think any of the 12 items have been addressed tonight. There are so many questions here that I'm just not understanding why none of the 12 things that 3 TRC meetings came up with, none of them have been addressed. And you're asking us to approve a project and disregarding all the things we asked you to look at on the project. So that's concerning to me too. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Liz?
I just want to make reference to the matrix that Joe spoke about that was developed by the Affordable Housing Collaborative. There were a number of points on that I think are really important to look at here. One is pedestrian access to employment, pedestrian access to schools, pedestrian access to shopping. If people cannot afford cars, they're going to have to walk, particularly the people in the affordable units. And when you think about how they're going to walk from this building to a location where there is shopping and there are schools and there is potential employment, the path that they're probably going to take is through Wakefield Meadows.
Thanks, Liz.
I think that's important to look at.
Robin?
I just have a question in general of when is an environmental impact statement required and when isn't it?
So that is prescribed in the subdivision regulations. And if you bear with me one moment, I had it up a second ago. The planning board has the authority to require the applicant to prepare an environmental impact statement when either of the two following conditions are met. If all or part of the property is the subject of the application includes land identified on map 5.3 of the comp plan of 1992 as being within a critically and environmentally sensitive area, or the planning board finds that there is reasonable expectation that the proposed subdivision or land development project will have a significant negative environmental impact on the natural systems located on the property that is the subject of the application, or upon nearby properties or natural systems.
And is it in that mapped area?
I do not believe it is in a critically and environmentally sensitive area. And the second statement, you would need to have reason to believe, in my opinion, that this would result in degradation of the environment. You'd have to justify it somehow.
So just to follow up on that, if DEM has issued wetlands permits and stormwater permits, or will, what basis would we have to ask beyond that?
That's a very valid question.
Jay, to add to Robin's question, this board does have the authority to ask for a third-party review of any aspect of an application. Can you explain how that might be relevant to Robin's question?
Sure. So again, in the subdivision regulations, it's called a project review fee, but it's commonly referred to as a peer review, where the planning board has the ability to have a third-party consultant brought on board at the applicant's expense to review components of the application that the planning board feels perhaps we don't have enough experience or knowledge on the board or staff to answer some of the questions that you may have. So when the planning board may recognize that there may be a shortfall in our experience or credentials, you do have the ability of going out for peer review. In order for that to work effectively, the peer review determination would need to be made at this stage of review and would be required. It causes a bit of a logistics issue because we have to assess the fee to the applicant, and then we have to go out, get that consultant to actually do the peer review, and you would need that done as you go into the preliminary plan. So there's a lot going on in a short period of time, but in order for it to be valid, you have to have it while you're undertaking the preliminary plan hearing. So you can use the information from the peer review to make your determination at preliminary.
Is that helpful? It's not quite the same as an EIS, but.
Yeah, I think that a peer review would be logical. I don't think that we are prepared as a board to really necessarily make that decision.
So to expand on that, if that is the consensus of the board would need to determine what components of the application need to be reviewed, what aspect of the application needs additional analyzing and professional review that we can't do at the current time.
Okay, so the first thing that would come to my mind would be the stormwater containment, the underground containment, how that is going to affect the Saugatucket basin. It's going to be a lot of water being put into the ground, right?
Sure. So I don't want to get too far off the rails here, and we didn't touch on this earlier, but with comprehensive permits, one of the major things with comprehensive permits is they do not need permits in hand until they get to final plan approval. So they come through conceptual master plan. Normally, those permits are required at preliminary. In this case, because it's a comprehensive permit, they're allowed to produce those at final. Now, if there's a concern with stormwater, they have to go to DEM for a stormwater permit. And it would be, I don't want to speak for the town engineer, maybe Mark can expand on this a little bit more, but if there's a threat to the environment from stormwater, I'd imagine that the DEM permit would not be issued. So there's a little, I don't know if it would be appropriate to do a peer review on stormwater when the permit may be coming, or, that's going to be coming later on. I think that might be a little too soon.
Mm-hmm. And then wildlife.
Again, that would be something the board would have to come to consensus that you need a peer review on some aspect or multiple aspects of the application because of X, Y, and Z. You need to articulate what the concern is, why we can't answer that concern now at the stage of review we're in now.
Thanks, Jay. Go ahead.
So since we're talking about stormwater, I think I'm understanding from this project that they will demolish the stormwater system that we required them to put in for the hotel. So now there's going to have to be a double stormwater system because we have all of the hotel runoff, now all this project runoff. So there's, you know, like they're demolishing a requirement we put in on the hotel.
Sure,
So the parking issue and the water issue are both going on with, you know, dipping into what the hotel has.
Mhm.
So I don't understand how that plays.
So the hotel, when the hotel was permitted, it went through a drainage review and got a drainage approval from DEM. The current proposal will require them to modify that existing system. And it's presumed that in modifying that system, it's going to comply with DEM stormwater regulations, and they will have to go to DEM to get a permit to confirm that. But they have asserted that they will be modifying the existing drainage system to accommodate this new system, this new development.
So it'll be clear to DEM that DEM doesn't need to ensure adequate stormwater management for a 70-unit apartment building, that DEM needs to ensure a stormwater system adequate for a whole hotel, all of that parking and runoff, and like it's
The watershed of the
clear
property.
on that application that DEM will, okay,
Yeah, they would be looking at the watershed of the property at the local,
okay.
at the property level.
And then I have one more question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Why don't you, no, I'll, after you.
And then we also just realized, I don't think we've seen a traffic study. Is there a traffic study that I haven't seen?
They have a traffic engineer that they stated will be coming to a future meeting.
Okay, thanks.
And-
Follow up on the,
And just to expand on that, this is conceptual master plan. So employing a traffic engineer at this stage might be a little too early as well. Typically, that's reserved for later.
Thanks.
but on the other hand, because at master plan they're vested, to not understand the implications of traffic would not be
I just jump in on that, just to say.
helpful.
I think certainly a preliminary plan, there's still going to be need for a traffic expert, but I think there is need for a traffic expert at the initial stage when you're talking about density, not to talk about specifics and hard details of engineering, but just to say, you know, here's the use, how many trips will this generate in general? They're asking for waivers in parking, just to look at those aspects. So I know that the applicant will have a traffic engineer. To have someone peer review that, I don't know if that's something that would be done in-house or better to do through a peer review. So that's something to consider.
Yes. And I have a follow-up question on the stormwater, probably for Mark. Is the current system that exists where theoretically the apartment complex would go that serves the hotel, is that representative of LID, low-impact design, that system that currently is on site?
I haven't reviewed
Okay.
the drainage of that system.
Okay.
However, I'd like to state that, I mean, I'm not sure even when that was built, how long ago. DEM did change their regulations, and they're more strict now, so that it might require a bigger system for both developments.
And I asked because it's more of an above-ground system as opposed to underground tanks and sort of the gray infrastructure versus what we like to think of as green infrastructure and the LID, the low-impact design. I just want to say that I agree with my fellow board members with all the concerns that have been expressed tonight. Land use planning looks at things in a broad perspective. It's not just one thing or another. It's stormwater, it's the impact, the impervious surfaces, the traffic, the circulation, pedestrian, the connectivity, the buffer, the building lot coverage. All of the things that have been discussed tonight are all things that in planning we need to consider. I am very concerned that this project, like my fellow board members, does not fit the site, that there is insufficient capacity for this. It certainly does not fit in with our idea of what is appropriate for South Kingstown. So it isn't just density, but it's the impact to all those other things that have been discussed tonight. And one of the reasons I read the 12 concerns from the TRC, is to make that clear that those things, those items have really not been addressed, certainly not in my opinion. If anyone else has any further comments, then I'd like to hear a motion to continue this public hearing to our next board meeting, which is February the 28th, I believe.
I'll make that motion. I will just add, though, I think that the thing that's missing from this project is a sense of community, a sense of place. So I think that if the architect and the applicant work on trying to develop a sense of community and sense of place, we might be able to get there, something in between. But with that said, I'll make that motion to continue.
Second.
Is there a second? Second from Paul. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight.
They're not listening to you.
February 8th. Jay, we have a, Joe is volunteering for the TRC February 8th.
Normally you do it at 9 a.m.? I'm good with 9.
Okay.
Get it over with.
If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn?
Those,
Do we have a motion to adjourn? It's a little
motion to adjourn.
Motion from Robin, second from Paul. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
From the outside, those Pulte condos, they are absolutely gorgeous on the inside. The Pulte, the Wakefield condos, Wakefield Meadows.
Oh,
All these people, where all these people live.
I don't think it's bad from the outside either.
Oh, I don't.
I've been down there.
I think it needs some land.